Hello everybody. Welcome to our talk about red squirrels. We're specifically focusing on how they are faring in Northern Ireland, but there'll be lots of other general background about red squirrels for anyone who doesn't know much about them. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Ross. I'm the Priority Species Officer for Ulster Wildlife. I'm joined by Katie this evening, who's the Senior Conservation Officer for Ulster Wildlife. We work on our terrestrial species projects all across Northern Ireland. There's three main species that we work on at the minute: barn owl, hedgehog, and red squirrels. So red squirrels are one of our most charismatic and beautiful species, although they tend to be quite elusive. This beautiful picture by the wonderful Ronald Surgener is a wonderful start to this talk, because they are such a beautiful animal whenever they're photographed so well. So there we go. So red squirrels, they are our native squirrel to Ireland. They have been presumably here since the melting of the ice caps, not the ice caps, the ice age. The ice age melt 10,000 years ago. They're a very distinctive animal. They're an arboreal rodent, red all over with a big bushy tail and the big lovely ear tufts, which are really prominent in the winter time. And then they've got this lovely wee pale belly as well. They're not always as red as that. It's something that it has to be looked out for. Sometimes they can be very, very grey. I've got two wonderful pictures for you here, if they will load up. Oh, the joys of technology. There we go. Perfect. So here are two pictures of red squirrels that were taken last year, in fact. The one on the left here I've nicknamed Blondie because of the beautiful little blonde tip to the tail and also the wee blonde tufts to its wee ears. And then the one on the right here is very, very dark as well. And you can actually see there's a little bit of grayness to its back. So the color variation on our red squirrels can vary wildly. So they're not just red. So it's something to bear in mind whenever you're out in the field and you see our lovely little red squirrels. So red squirrels are found all across Eurasia, and they're found all the way from the islands of Japan and to Korea and Russia and all the way through into Central Europe and then to us in the UK and Ireland. Where they live? Well, they are woodland specialists. They are arboreal species. They're brilliant for climbing. They're found in both deciduous woodlands and coniferous woodlands. In the UK and Ireland, they are their preference is for deciduous woodlands because there's lots more food in the environment, and there's lots of different species in complex woodlands that mean that there's lots of different food resources at different times of the year. Red squirrels can survive in coniferous woodlands, but in Northern Ireland specifically, they aren't as readily abundant in those woodlands. They're not as densely populated in coniferous woodlands as they are in deciduous woodlands. But in the Taiga of Russia, they obviously enjoy the coniferous species there. They are excellent climbers, and they've got amazing adaptations to be brilliant climbers. They've got super long claws, which help them grip into the bark of the trees. And then they have this really cool adaptation where their back legs, their ankles actually rotate. So if you imagine us, our hands and our feet both face the same direction, and if we're scrambling up something, it helps us propel up. But squirrels, whenever they want to go down a tree, they can actually rotate their leg 100 or their ankle 180 degrees. So they're basically hanging off the tree like so, and then the hands are facing forward. And so this helps them go down trees really fast, as well as being able to go up trees really fast. And trees are so important to our squirrels because they are reliant on them for everything. They're reliant on them for food, they're reliant on them for shelter, they're relying on them for ways to move across a landscape. Squirrels are a true woodland specialist species. Just want to demonstrate here the wonderful climbing skills of our red squirrels. There's two here that are chasing each other. Hopefully this video plays. Oh no, it's not playing. Hang on. There we go. So quick and so nimble as they climb over the branches there. So I think the squirrel behind is a male and it's chasing the female. It's stomping its foot a wee bit. It's hidden away. I'll just play the start of that again. Just watch how quickly the second one scampers up the tree there. It's a cracking wee bit of footage. Class. Perfect. So I said they were totally reliant on trees. One of the things that they're totally reliant on is shelter, what we call drays. So squirrels will build little homes for themselves. These are made up of sticks and leaves and sometimes feathers and sometimes moss and dry grass, and they line the inside of these like stick balls with all these beautiful insulating materials. And this keeps them warm, especially during the winter time. The red squirrel can actually heat up the dray with its own body heat, and if it builds a really good insulating layer, then it retains that heat. And so even whenever it's snowing outside, they can stay lovely and toasty and warm inside the dray. Sometimes if there's tree hollows available, they'll use them as well. They'll line the tree hollow with moss and other dry grass and things like this and just use that natural cavity space. But drays tend to be preferred because they're out on the limbs of branches, and so it's a little bit more secure. They tend to be nestled just in the base of the branch in towards the trunk, like this picture here. And every squirrel will make multiple drays. On average, a single squirrel will have 3 to 5 different drays that it can use, and they'll have they're very, very fancy, these wee squirrels. They will have a summer home, they'll have a winter home, and the females will have a natal breeding den, breeding dray. And so whenever they're having their kits, they'll have a separate dray, and then they'll have maybe another 2 or 3 drays that they can move between at different times of year. And part of that is to do with the change of the weather through the seasons. You don't have a really insulated dray for your summertime. You want it a wee bit more open and allow a little bit more breeze to come in, because it's better for reducing parasites and things like that living in your dray. And then in the winter, you want one that's really tight and really insulated. So a single squirrel will build these drays, and then it will use them at different times of year, which is really cool. For context, they're about the size of a football. It's quite hard to see in that picture, but so they're not huge, but there's enough to fit 1 or 2 squirrels inside safely. As I said there, the female squirrel will have her kits inside the drays. The first litter of the year is normally born in around February, and then the kits then, as they mature, then the female will have a second litter in the summertime as well, so they can have 2 sets of young every single year. So what do they eat? Well, in the springtime, they're making use of what's coming about, this new growth and new life that's springing up. They'll eat leaf buds that are just coming in, and then whenever the buds burst, they'll eat the lovely, crispy little leaf shoots. And then they'll also eat any catkins that are around. Catkins are a seed-producing organ, or a pollen-producing organ, sorry, for plants, trees such as willow and alder and birch. And whenever they're young and fresh, the squirrels absolutely adore them. And then in the summertime, they'll start eating flowers and they'll be eating leaf shoots. And if they're really lucky, they'll even get a wee bird's egg if one comes into their little tree hollow. And they won't mind snaffling on a little bit of protein if they can get it, although it's not their primary food source. And then in the autumn time, that's when things go mad for our squirrels. They eat nuts, they eat fruit and seeds and fungi even. If anyone was lucky enough to go on our Glenarm squirrel walk this morning, you'll have seen lots of little fungi being nibbled by red squirrels. Check out the Ulster Wildlife socials to see pictures of that. And then, oh, sorry, I hadn't actually put it up there, but there you go. There's the fungi there. So in the autumn time, they eat this real variety of different foods, this bounty that's come about. And so often people who are monitoring red squirrels won't see them as much as we move into the autumn because they're out foraging in all of this natural food, which is brilliant. And then in the winter time, they'll be eating things that are not so nice, tree bark and sometimes tree sap as well. But really importantly, cached food. So in that real autumn bounty, squirrels will be really busy, not only just putting on weight for the winter and eating as much food as they can, but they'll be catching as much food as they can as well. So they will be storing it in little locations. They'll be putting, like you see here, little cones and little piles. They'll be burying acorns individually. And that's really, really important for our squirrels because that gives them a food source to access all year round. In the wintertime, there's this sort of myth that squirrels hibernate in the wintertime. That's not strictly true. They definitely slow down and they're not as active. They'll spend more of their days sleeping in their drays to stay warm. But the squirrel will venture out of its dray to find food and often to visit its cache stores, because they don't store all of their food in one place. They store it lots of different places. And squirrels are brilliant at remembering where their acorns are buried. One single squirrel can bury nearly 3,000 acorns in one autumnal season, and then they can remember 70% of those acorns that they've buried, which is amazing because I can't remember where I put my car keys when I came in today, and so I'll have to find them tomorrow morning. So squirrels have a much bigger memory than you'd give them credit for. Squirrels are really important to our woodland ecosystems, and the main reason is what I've just described there. They remember 70% of all the seeds that they bury, which is absolutely amazing, but that 30% is really crucial because that helps these trees disperse their seeds and their nuts, and they plant them in the ground, and they basically become little forest engineers. They start new forests by planting these seeds in other places, which is brilliant. And it's really important for trees that they are spreading their seeds far away because they don't want their offspring growing up underneath them because they're likely to shade them out and then virtually kill them. So by the squirrels moving these nuts away from the parent tree, it gives the tree the best chance of having young, but that's not quite the right terminology, of passing on its genetics and having new trees elsewhere. So squirrels are really important as part of our natural woodland ecosystems. So what are our natural predators to our red squirrels? To be honest, there's not actually that much. A lot of predators are opportunistic, and so they'll try and go for a squirrel if they can. A fox is a prime example of this. They'll go for a red squirrel if they can get their hands on it, but the squirrels are normally nifty enough to jump back into the trees. Buzzards as well, they don't really go for squirrels, but if one is not very well and it's away from woodland, the buzzard may take the opportunity that it can. Stoats, they're another ground predator. Again, if there's a squirrel on the ground and it's a wee bit lazy and it's not quite sharp, then the stoat may be able to get it. And then we have the pine marten here as well, which is an animal which is coming back in a big way here in Northern Ireland. They can predate on red squirrels. They can climb up into trees, and they can also get into squirrel drays as well. So that's something that red squirrels are savvy to, and they tend to avoid areas with pine martens. I've also read some research there recently that some squirrels will build false drays where they would appear to not be structurally sound, and so whenever you go to investigate the dray sort of just falls out of the tree and it sort of puts off predators. The theory is it puts off predators from investigating drays because they think it's just a pile of sticks that's actually not useful. So maybe that's something that they use to deter for pine martens. I don't know, but that's an interesting theory. Something else that's getting brought up more and more is cats and dogs, our pets. There are 11 million cats in the UK, and they pose a big risk to our wildlife. I raise cats specifically because dogs will chase squirrels, as seen in this picture here. There is a site local to us here where it's a National Trust property called Mount Stewart. They had a red squirrel killed by a dog, and they now have a dogs on leads policy at all times because red squirrels are a protected species in Northern Ireland under the Northern Ireland Wildlife Order, and it's important that we take responsibility of our pets and the actions that they have on our wildlife. So our red squirrels are protected, so please be conscious of that when you're out with your dog. Please keep on the lead if you know there's red squirrels in the forest. And then cats as well. For whatever reason, cats are allowed to be outside all the time and dogs aren't, which is something that society says is okay, and I think is rather strange because cats pose a real significant problem to wildlife. We're very aware of how much they catch birds, they catch mice and shrews, but they can also take squirrels as well, and especially because they have that extra climbing ability, the squirrels are more vulnerable to cats. So it's something that is a big issue that doesn't get talked about enough. So now onto the grey squirrel. So so the grey squirrel is another squirrel that you see in Northern Ireland. It's actually not from Northern Ireland, it's not from Europe. It is the North American grey squirrel. One of the big differences is immediately you can see it doesn't have big ear tufts on its ears. If you see ear tufts on a squirrel, it's definitely a red squirrel as opposed to a grey. They're also much bigger, they're much heavier. Obviously, they're very grey all over, although they're very kind of mixed with orangey and yellow colours as well. But another really key feature to look for on a grey squirrel is their tail. Red squirrels' tails tend to be all the same color, whereas a grey squirrel tail tends to have lots of different colors in it. And then also around the edge of the squirrel's tail, there's like this little white halo because every single hair has got this little white tip to it. I've got a picture later on that shows it a little better than this, but that's a really distinctive feature as well. So as I spoiled slightly, they are a non-native species. They come from North America, and this is what their natural geographical range looks like. They live east of the Rockies, and they don't tend to stray too far into Canada. And one of the reasons for this is that they are deciduous woodland specialists. They don't like carnivorous woodland that much at all. Another reason is potentially there isn't the same level of martens or boreal mustelids in this area, but I'm not an absolute expert on mammals in North America, so that may or may not be true. So what's the story of the grey squirrels in Ireland? Well, they were introduced to Britain in the late 1890s, very popular with Victorians. They loved to bring exotic animals from all over the place. And grey squirrels were one such animal which they thought would be brilliant within the British countryside. Turns out it was not the case. Spoilers. In Ireland, the introduction to Ireland was slightly more recent. There was a wedding in County Longford to a big estate owner in 1911. And so all the grey squirrels in Ireland are descended from the squirrels from that release. I think it's 12 squirrels were released in as part of that birthday present. You can see here from this map, which is from 1945 from the UK Squirrel Accord maps. The red here is all red squirrel, grey is grey squirrel, and the orange is both of them. And you can see that you can start to see that grey spread in the south of England and up into Wales and into North England, and a little bit in Scotland. But in Ireland, you can see it's mainly just in County Longford where there's greys, and the rest of the island is still really dominated by red squirrels. Unfortunately, that begins to change because our greys threaten our native red squirrels. So greys are an invasive non-native species from North America, and they have a devastating impact on our native red squirrel species. There's a couple of reasons for this. So the first one is that grey squirrels live at higher densities than red squirrels. So in deciduous woodland where there's lots of food, a grey squirrels can live to 6 animals per hectare, whereas red squirrel can live, it's normally about 1 a squirrel per hectare. So the grey squirrels are bigger, they have there's more of them, and they eat as much food as they possibly can, whereas the red squirrels are more spread out. Grey squirrels therefore outcompete red squirrels for food. They have access to more food resources. Oaks and acorns are a great example. Acorns are really high in tannins, which are very hard for red squirrels to digest. But grey squirrels have less of a problem digesting them. And so a grey squirrel can eat a green acorn and a red squirrel can't. So if there's one oak tree that's supplying all the squirrels with all the food, if the grey squirrels come and they eat all the acorns while they're still green, then there's no food left for the red squirrel once those acorns are meant to be matured for them. And so the fact that grey squirrels can overpower the red squirrels, so to speak, in numbers, they take all of that food resource out of the environment before the red squirrels can cache it for the winter. It has a really bad effect on our red squirrels. And the last one, and a really crucial one, is the spread of a disease called squirrelpox. So squirrelpox is a virus that the grey squirrels are not affected by, or if they are affected by it, it's very minimal, something like a common cold. But they are carriers of this disease, and they spread it to other places, and they spread it to our red squirrels. Now, if our red squirrels get this disease, unfortunately, it has a range of terrible symptoms. They start to get low energy. They start to lose their coordination, which is a really crucial part to living in the trees. They start to get these open sores on their skin and ulcers, and the ulcers burst, and it's really horrible. I'm going to put up a picture here of what a squirrel with squirrelpox looks like. If anyone doesn't like looking at gruesome pictures or anything, then just be aware I'm going to have this on the screen, and there's going to be a couple more pictures in the next couple of minutes. So don't look at the screen and just listen to me, and I'll tell you whenever they're finished. So this is a squirrel with squirrelpox. You can see this lesion on its eye has completely destroyed its eye, and it's also lost its right ear as well. So the virus itself is spread through contact and fluids. So if a grey squirrel is at an area and it's urinated, and then the red squirrel comes and gets it on its hands, and it wipes its hands on its face and everything, then that's how the virus can spread. So if you're putting out any food for birds, or even if you're putting out food for squirrels, and you have there's a likelihood that both grey squirrels and red squirrels can come to this feeder at the same time, please, we would advise not feeding at all, but out of caution, disinfect all feeders regularly if that's something that may occur in your area, just because if one grey squirrel that's carrying this disease passes it onto the feeder, then there's a chance that the red squirrel can catch that disease, and then that can spread amongst the red squirrel population really, really quickly. I've just two other wee pictures here, and then I'll move on from the gory pictures. Again, horrendous examples of squirrelpox virus and the effect that it can have on our red squirrels. And eventually these symptoms overcome the squirrels, and they either can't feed or they get predated. And it can have a devastating impact on our squirrels very, very quickly. Okay, there's the pictures gone for now. Come back if anyone had left us. So our red squirrels are under threat. And again, these maps from the UK Squirrel Accord, they really highlight the change that has happened in our landscape regarding red squirrels over the past 100 years or so. So if we look particularly at Britain just for a second, the difference between 1945 and 2010, the grey squirrel kind of army has swarmed over the whole southern half of Britain. In Scotland, there's more of a mix going on. You have reds in some places. You have the central belt of Scotland, which is really urbanized, which has grey squirrels, and then there's the orange of both either side. Those areas with the red tend to be either traditional highland coniferous forests, or they are forestry plantation forest. But then if you look at Ireland, things are a little different. In Ireland, there tends to be a skew for grey squirrels in the east and then red squirrels in the west. And if you have a look at Northern Ireland, it's even more different again. There's a lot more orange in Northern Ireland. So in Northern Ireland, red squirrels and grey squirrels historically are in conflict a lot. And so that is why organizations like Ulster Wildlife work on red squirrel conservation. So what does red squirrel conservation in Northern Ireland look like today? So Ulster Wildlife have been involved in red squirrel conservation for a number of years now. Most recently, we have produced a conservation strategy for Northern Ireland. This is for stakeholders and organizations and councils. They can refer to this document in how they can help conserve our red squirrels. And there's lots of guidance in there about best practice and our aims for red squirrel conservation for the next 10 years. It's really important to highlight at this stage there are so many different red squirrel volunteer groups across Northern Ireland that are doing amazing work for red squirrels in their local communities and in their local areas. Some red squirrel groups are really, really active and some aren't as active, but this is the map of all the red squirrel groups that exist right now in Northern Ireland, which represents a tremendous amount of people who are helping our red squirrels. And here is apologies there. Here is a fine selection of some of those fantastic people and the work that they're doing. I want to give a shout out to someone who wasn't on that map there, the Cumbrae Rotary Club in the bottom right there. They make a lot of our red squirrel feeders, which we use for our surveys, and we also distribute amongst the different groups depending on their needs. So there's lots and lots of different squirrel groups involved all around Northern Ireland, and every single one are really important for our red squirrels. Something else that Ulster Wildlife is doing right now for red squirrels, we carry out every 2 years a presence-absence survey for squirrels and pine martens. So we coordinate this survey all across Northern Ireland, and we do a lot of surveying ourselves, but it also involves lots of those volunteers, lots of those red squirrel groups, and many other different partner organizations. We monitor basically we're looking for the distribution and the present absence of red squirrels, grey squirrels, and pine martens in different woodlands all across Northern Ireland. And we've been doing this survey since 2017. Now, I've mentioned them a couple of times now, so I'm just going to briefly give a little bit of context to them. This is the pine marten. This is an unlikely ally for our red squirrel. So pine martens are a mustelid, so in the same family as weasels and stoats, but they are a boreal opportunistic predator. So they live in the trees just like the squirrels, but not only are they predators, they are omnivores, so they will eat birds and they will eat small mammals like mice and rats and shrews, but they will also eat berries, and they'll also eat nuts, and they'll also eat fungi and beetles and insects as well. So they'll take whatever they can get. They're about the size of a large cat, although a long tube-shaped cat, and they are very, very agile, and they are very great at climbing as well. They do hunt squirrels. That's something that we're conscious of, and I mentioned at the top there. But a lot of scientific research has gone into this over the last number of years, as our pine martens appear to be making a resurgence in Ireland and Northern Ireland. And it would appear that they have a preference for grey squirrels. So pine martens and red squirrels have co-evolved together, and so red squirrels are probably savvy to the pine martens, whereas our grey squirrels, being a non-native invasive invader, they aren't. And for whatever reason, the pine marten has a significant effect at displacing grey squirrels from areas where there are lots of pine martens, which is really good for our red squirrel, because wherever there is no grey squirrels, our red squirrels are given the opportunity to thrive. So they are an important species as part of our presence absence survey. So why is this survey important? Well, we are able to then monitor population distribution across Northern Ireland and monitor trends over a long period of time. It allows us to be vigilant in case we need to make any drastic action to protect our populations of red squirrels. And it helps inform local conservation and landscape scale conservation as well. So it's a brilliant survey that gives us a greater, broader look at how these three species are distributed across Northern Ireland. Here is some images from our camera trapping over the 2022 survey. So the survey involves putting up a motion triggered camera in the woodlands adjacent to a squirrel feeder. And the feeder is then laced with bait, sunflower seeds and peanuts. And the camera is left out for 2 weeks. This is Blondie, unfortunately living up to the stereotype where it figured out how to get food and then forgot how to get food. It's trying to pull the front of the feeder off there. If you've never seen a squirrel feeder, basically there's a lid with a hinge and the squirrel pushes the hinge up and then the squirrel goes in and it gets its food. And so this prevents like birds from pillaging all the food, but smart mammals like pine marten and squirrel can actually access these little feeders. Here's a picture of the enemy, the grey squirrels. Boo, hiss, and all that. This particular image is actually really good for showing the difference between the two species. You can see the tail there has that little white halo around the edge of it there. So even in black and white, I don't need color to tell that this is a grey squirrel. I can see that white halo on the edge of the tail, so I know that this is a pair of grey squirrels. And then finally, we have our pine martens. And something I learned in 2022 is that pine martens are absolute posers. Look at this. This one here thinks she's in vogue. What about this gentleman here looking incredibly regal, standing on those branches, looking out over the landscape. But I've also learned not only are they posers, they're absolute messers as well. Here's two pine marten kits fighting over the feeder. It's pretty hard to lift the lid up whenever your sibling is standing on your head, crushing your head. Dear love it. I saw quite a few pictures a lot like this during this survey. So this is the scope of our survey in 2022, and then these are all the different organizations and volunteer groups that were involved. There was 8 red squirrel groups involved in 2022 and 7 different partner organizations. So it's this huge collaborative effort with volunteers and other members of other NGOs working together to monitor our red squirrel, grey squirrel and pine marten populations all across Northern Ireland, which is brilliant. So I am going to reveal the results of that survey compared to our very first survey in 2017. So in 2017, there was 224 woodlands surveyed, and in 2022, there was 218 woodlands surveyed. So a similar number of woodlands. So there is a lovely little comparison here we can do. So just have a wee think for a wee second. I forgot to make a poll for this, but which of the 3 species do you think was seen the most on our survey? Red squirrel, grey squirrel, or pine marten? Let me see if I can make a poll. Let me see. I can. So let me quickly put this in. Have a wee think. Which one do you think was seen more than any others? Now, if you have read our report, which is available online, you're not allowed to respond because you know the answer. Which was seen most. Perfect. Okay, save, and then let me see if I can launch that. Please excuse the Zoom technical difficulties. Oh, I forgot to name it, so I don't know which one's which. Yes, it's that one. Perfect. Launch. So the poll is launched. You should have a little prompt there to pick which of the three species you think was seen the most in Northern Ireland. I don't know if anyone can see the results yet, or if it's just me that can see the results. But very interesting indeed. Very interesting. Okay, brilliant. So we have the results in. Only one person thinks red squirrel was the most abundantly seen animal of the three. Pine marten with a quarter of everybody thinking pine marten was seen the most, and gray squirrel with a 72%. So you all think gray squirrel was the most seen animal of those three species. Very good, very interesting. Well, I have a surprise for you. In third place, we have, if PowerPoint will help me be dramatic, there we go, perfect. In third place, it was actually our grey squirrel. So in 2017, they were found in 50 woodlands, present in 50 woodlands, and in 2022, they were found in 48 woodlands. So they'd actually gone down. They're found in 2 less woodlands than they were 5 years previous. Here's a lovely picture of St. Deer in the background there with this grey squirrel. In second place, we have our red squirrels. So our red squirrels, 53 woodlands were found to have red squirrels present in 2017, but in 2022, 72 woodlands were found with red squirrels. So that's 19 more woodlands than the survey 5 years ago, which is a really good sign. And then lastly, and quite dramatically, we have in first place the pine marten. So the quarter of you that said pine marten, congratulations, you were right, and or you already read our report and you knew the answer. So I'll give you points for that anyway, because that's great. So it's a very dramatic increase, actually. In 2017, there was 45 woodlands with pine marten present, and in 2018, there was 89 woodlands present with pine martens. So that's a big jump up indeed. You can see here, this picture, there's 4 different pine martens trying to get on the one feeder at one time. So they can be very boisterous indeed when they're clambering for food. But what does this actually look like? Where are these woodlands? What have we been seeing? Well, here are our comparison maps. So the way that these maps work is that the Northern Ireland is split up into 10 by 10 kilometre grids. And if one woodland within that 10-kilometre grid had a red squirrel, at least one woodland had a red squirrel, then it gets filled in with a little red square. So some of these red squares represent maybe 10 woodlands that all have red squirrels, and one red square may only have one woodland with red squirrels in it. And you can see here that the distribution in Northern Ireland is about the same, which often some people will say, oh, that's not good, it's not gone up. But actually, considering the decrease over the last 100 years, to see that red squirrels are sort of holding steady is really good on a landscape scale. Now, I know our woodland number went up, but the reason for that is I think that a lot of our squirrel groups were really good at knowing where the red squirrels were. And so they were targeting survey areas where these red squirrels were. So that's what's inflated it a little bit. But on a landscape scale, our red squirrels are holding steady. We have in the west there, in Fermanagh, red squirrels are found all throughout Fermanagh. On the fringes of County Tyrone, the red squirrels are about just like they were 5 years before, present in the northwest in Derry City, and then in the Glens of Antrim in the north, around the Mournes in the south, and around Slieve Gullion in South Armagh, and then in the North Down Ards Peninsula area as well, red squirrels were present in 2022. So really good to see red squirrels have held strong in those 5 years. We move on to grey squirrels. Again, the maps are very similar. There tends to be a strong presence of grey squirrels in the east over the west, although the northwest has more grey squirrels squares filled in than 2017. There's been some new squirrel groups up in the northwest. The Benevenant red squirrel group is very new, and so I suspect there's some woodlands that have been surveyed in 2022 that weren't surveyed in 2017. it's not something that we can say, or I should say, one thing that is conclusive is in both of these years, there are no grey squirrels found in County Fermanagh, which is really good. So if we go back to the previous one, there are red squirrels found in all 6 counties in Northern Ireland, but actually grey squirrels are only found in 5 counties in Northern Ireland. So on county level, the red squirrels are winning. And then curiously, with our survey, there appears to be a slight traction of grey squirrels in County Tyrone, which is very exciting. Although this is just 1 year survey, so we're not saying that there's no grey squirrels in County Tyrone. There's definitely one grey block there. We also we were surveying in more rural areas, so we didn't really survey in the centre of any towns or cities. So the big towns in Tyrone, Cookstown and Dungannon and Strabane and Omagh, they weren't surveyed, and they almost certainly have grey squirrels still in them. But our survey would suggest that grey squirrels are starting to attract in County Tyrone, which would be very exciting for our reds. And then finally, this map, you can see a very obvious change. This is our Pine Marten survey. These are the Pine Marten results, sorry. And you can see here immediately that there's many more brown squares on the right-hand map than there is on the left-hand side. And Pine Marten appear to have spread to everywhere and are now found in all 5 counties in Northern Ireland, just like our red squirrels. And so having been confined to certain areas 5 years before, they are found in lots of different places that they haven't been seen before now in 2022. So the Pine Marten is coming back, which is a really good sign for our red squirrels. I want to show a couple more maps now. Now, these are squirrel sightings. So any member of the public can submit sightings of squirrels to our recording database at CEDAR. So the Centre for Environmental Data and Recording is the national one for Northern Ireland. And we also, Wildlife, we also have our recording database now. We pass all of our records on to CEDAR, so everything gets funneled into the central system. So these are the squirrel records from members of the public in 2012. What's really important here is this is not an accurate distribution of these squirrels. This is just sightings records. So that's really important to note. But you can see here where the red squirrels are roughly where our map, our survey was showing. There's a little bit of red squirrel spread, but grey squirrels are really, really comprehensive in Northern Ireland. And crucially, there is grey squirrels in County Fermanagh. Whereas if we jump ahead 10 years, things have changed dramatically according to our sightings. You can see there's a big red area in the west around County Fermanagh and into County Tyrone, and the greys appear to have contracted a little bit. Now, again, this is not an accurate distribution. Do not look at this as a de facto, this is where these animals are. But crucially, if you're looking at this map and going, no, that's definitely wrong, there's no red squirrels there, or there's no grey squirrels there, please submit your sightings. If you've seen any of these species, please submit your sightings to us, and I'll talk about that a bit at the end. And then also, I want to show this map as well. This is the Pine Marten change a decade apart. Pine martens are an elusive mammal, which are nocturnal, so they're actually quite hard to see. So I couldn't just take 1 year because there was so few pine marten sightings. I didn't think it was representative. So I took 4 years of pine marten sightings for 2010 and 2014. So all 4 years combined make up that little purple blotches. And then just 2022 sightings from members of the public is that green. And you can see here the change dramatically in that distribution across Northern Ireland is extraordinary. So our pine martens have spread in a big way in the last 10 years, which is really good for our red squirrels. Now, pine martens are a predator. It's something that we have to recognize is that whenever these animals come back, there is going to be a little bit of conflict with people. They do den in tree cavities, and so they like to go for like little holes, sometimes in buildings and sometimes in people's attics, and sometimes they can predate on anything that, you know, they're opportunists. If there's a weak hole in a fence, they'll try to get in. But there's lots of advice out there for how to pine marten proof any chicken coops or game coops, or if you've got a hole in your attic and you think there could be animals inside, there's some brilliant advice out there online. for how to prevent pine martens from causing a problem, because prevention is much better than trying to solve the issue. So it's something to be aware of. If you don't think there's pine martens out there and they aren't a problem for you, things are suggesting that they are starting to spread. So just be conscious of that. So our survey summary for 2022 is red squirrel spread is similar, but our populations are still quite fragmented. Grey squirrels are strong in the east, although they appear to not be as strong as in the west as they were a number of years ago. And pine martens are spreading to more woodlands everywhere, which is great news because it is an iconic animal, part of our landscape, and it's really important that we get our natural ecosystems back in balance so that they are resilient to change, climate change, human factors, but also to invasive non-native species like our grey squirrel. I also just want to quickly show you, I know this is a lot of maps, but I'll fly through these ones. This is just this was an all-Ireland squirrel survey that was done in 2012 and 2019. And again, they took account of pine marten because pine martens kept popping up as well. And basically, in the whole of Ireland, red squirrels are up from 2012 to 2019. Grey squirrels are slightly down. You can see again in the squirrel range in the east in general is starting to retract into the west. The squirrel range in the west is starting to retract into the east, excuse me. And then pine martens again are much more abundant than they were, which is really, really cool to see. So this is all really good news. The tide is starting to turn for our red squirrels, but it's really important to note that locally, on a local level, our red squirrels are still under threat. We've had some big successes recently with red squirrels turning up in new places, which is great. Like I mentioned, the Benevina Red Squirrel Group recently formed because they found red squirrels there for the first time. But we've also had some recent extinctions of red squirrels in local areas recently too. So for every time a red squirrel wins, unfortunately, they're also losing as well. The really key one for me is Beaver Park in Belfast. The last red squirrel was seen there in 2014. This population in Belfast was a real stronghold within the Lagan Valley area, and it was a real devastation to lose them. I remember going to Beaver Park and seeing the red squirrels there, and to have red squirrels in our urban areas. It shows that they can be an urban species. They once were an urban species, and we can't forget that because the grey squirrel has taken over. Unfortunately, more recently, in 2021, the Clandyboy estate outside Bangor, they had red squirrels, but unfortunately, they were lost to squirrelpox. I'm actually showing you here a picture of one of the animals that was seen with, I should say, suspected squirrelpox. It was never confirmed. We never retrieved any of the carcasses to confirm that it was squirrelpox. But this picture and the following picture aren't as distressing as those other ones I showed earlier, but they show the impacts that even early on that the pox can have on red squirrels, the swelling around the eyes and the lower lip there. And so it was a real shame that another stronghold for red squirrels for many years, the grey squirrels overwhelmed the area and the red squirrels were eventually lost. And now, looking forward into the future, in Derry, Londonderry City, red squirrels have been there for a long, long time. But recently, the Northwest Group are reporting to us that red squirrels are starting to be lost from the urban areas there. The red squirrels in the city cemetery featured on Springwatch a number of years ago. And they were very easily seen. And now a lot of people aren't seeing red squirrels. They aren't reporting red squirrels from the town, from the city anymore. So potentially maybe that's happening now. We could be seeing an extinction within the city. They are on the fringes. The Northwest Group do a brilliant job along the river and in Muff Glen, which is just outside the city. So there are red squirrels in the area, but in the city themselves, will there be red squirrels there in a couple of years' time? It remains to be seen. It needs some attention. So, how can you help? How can you aid red squirrel conservation? The most important thing that you can do is submit your sightings. You may see squirrels every day. and think, oh, everyone knows the squirrels there. But the reality is that's not the case. Red squirrels are popping up in all loads of different places in the last couple of years that no one has expected them to. And so if you are seeing red squirrels, please submit your sightings. There's someone on this call who submitted a red squirrel sighting this year from a forest that they were not known from. So it just goes to show that submitting sightings are really important to for red squirrel conservation and understanding their distribution. And if we understand their distribution, then we can help protect them. It's really easy to do. If you go onto the Ulster Wildlife website, there's a tab called Report Your Sightings, and you can follow this little, just fill out this little form and you put in all your details. And you basically move a little mouse to click the point on the map where the squirrel is, and that's you. It's really easy. There's a QR code here that if you have your phone on you right now, you can put your camera over it and bring up the form, and you can fill it in on your phone right now. If you saw a squirrel today or yesterday or over the weekend, you can do that. If you do report a squirrel sighting on your desktop, you actually get what this image is right here. You get to see this map of squirrel sightings, and you can even change the dates on it so you can see any squirrels that are near you recently. All sensitive data is hidden in line with GDPR guidelines, so all you can see is the date, the species, and how many squirrels were seen, and it's populated with these lovely little dots here. So there's red squirrels and grey squirrels, and we also accept pine marten records as well. And so you can just see from this map, I know it's not particularly clear, but a lot of grey squirrels are being reported from Belfast and in the Bangor area, and there's lots of red squirrels being seen throughout County Tyrone and Fermanagh, and even in the Mournes here in County Down as well, and also in sporadic places in the north too, which is brilliant. How else you can help? Well, you can support your local red squirrel group. There's lots of different ways to support your local red squirrel group. These squirrel groups are all made up of volunteers, and they've got funding for their equipment and everything, but they all do it in their free time. It's a great way to meet new people. It's a great way to engage with your local community. The easiest way to support them is to donate to them, but become a member, pay a wee small fee every year, and that really helps them out in doing the work that they do. And you can even get active and volunteer. Monitoring is something that they do. You saw that they participated in our presence absence survey all across Northern Ireland. They're always looking more hands to be able to go into forest that they can then check and put up cameras and see if there's squirrels present or pine martens. Help with the fundraising. They do lots of events, as you can see from these pictures, raffles and all sorts, and they end up talking to people about squirrels and trying to raise funds for their conservation projects. Event support, as I said. Social media, that's another big one. There's a number of squirrel groups that have reached out to us at the minute, and they say that they're great on the ground and they're great talking to people, they're great looking after squirrels, but they need to engage in social media more to get more of a following and get more people involved. So if you're a techie person and you have maybe half an hour to spend a week helping out people with Facebook posts, then it's a great way to do it. Another really crucial thing is grey squirrel control. Unfortunately, our grey squirrels, as I've explained there, they have a really negative impact on our red squirrels. And so removing grey squirrels from our environment is really important. It's not for everybody, but everyone within the groups is trained on a Lantra accredited course that Ulster Wildlife and their funders fund. So we can get everyone to do everything the best possible way that they can to help protect our red squirrels and adhere to all animal welfare guidelines. And then finally, really simple, raise awareness. If you didn't know anything before this talk about red squirrels in Northern Ireland, and you didn't think we had them, and you thought they were really rare, and you thought that that they were gone, raise awareness, talk about it. Just talk about it on social media, but also just talk about it with your friends and family. Talk about squirrelpox. Talk about where red squirrels once were and where they are right now. It's really, really simple, because just if everyone became more aware, then everybody would be more supportive of looking after our red squirrels, which is really important. And finally, I'm going to leave you with this fantastic wee bit of footage that we got this year from this little young squirrel who's just figured out how to use one of our feeders. Oh, I don't know why that cut off there. There you go. Technology. It's the way it goes. Let's see if it doesn't cut off this time. A cute wee thing. This looks like a young squirrel. There you go. Beautiful. Perfect. Thank you all so much for listening.